Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a new episode of Education Exchange, one of the longest running TV shows in the nation. This is our 27th year on the air. The program began a quarter of a century ago by John Carhoff and Mike Peterson on Public Access TV. And then it moved to the education cable channel. And from there, nowadays, on YouTube as well. I'm Hani Al-Qadi, the producer and host of the program. Holly Hines, the K-12 education reporter at the Press Citizen, and I will be the moderators this evening. On behalf of Education Exchange, Iowa City Press Citizen, and Public Access TV, our sponsor as well, we welcome J.P. Clausen, Janet Goodwin, Ruthina Malone, Laura Westmeyer, and Karen Waltman, who are competing for 3 expiring seats, as well as Charlie Eastham and Sean Eystone, who are vying for a vacated seat of a resigned director last July. Our distinguished school board candidates will have their last public chance as a group this evening to define their stand vis-a-vis the general obligation bond referendum. In addition, we invited 2 representatives from the Vote No committee, Carolyn Titrelli and Mary Murphy, as well as 2 parents from the One Community, One Bond group, Mary Belcher Hayek and Mitch Gross. During the first half of this live streaming, we will discuss only one topic, and that's the bond issue. To be more precise, the language of the bond referendum. At 7 o'clock, we will take a 10 minutes break, and we'll reconvene to answer more questions from our audience about any issue they would like to raise. Thank you for your time and attention. Now, Holly Hines will ask our first question to the Vote Yes representatives. I will raise a yellow card to let you know that you have only 30 seconds to wrap up your answer, and a red card to tell you that you need to stop. This should take 6 minutes on one side, and then we'll move to the other side, the Vote No committee. And then after we finish all that, and everybody will have their chance, we'll move to the third question that will be directed by Holly Hines to the distinguished candidates of the Board of Directors. Each one of them will have as well 3 minutes to answer her question. And then I will receive here questions from our wonderful audience that honor us for being here tonight. And we'll look at how many of them we can absorb. And once we're done with that, at 7 o'clock, the crew of Public Access TV will leave us, and we'll start discussing any issue that you would like to discuss with the candidates, the supporters, as well as the opponents. I'll try to be as impartial as I can. What my position has nothing to do with this forum. I'll be very, very sad if we ended up tilting towards one side or another. And if you at any time feel this, raise your hand so I know that we are not doing the good thing. because we are expressing the real democracy here. And you people are devoting your time, your tears, your blood, your valuable minutes of the day in order to get a job that's not even rewarding. And not many people will say thank you at the end. And you will get no money for that. I mean, you could be even sitting, delivering pizza. You will make better money than sitting on the board of directors of education. So thank you for even your willingness. By being a candidate by itself is an honor. You are telling this community how valuable and precious you are, whether you win or you don't make it this time. Thank you very much, Holly Hines.
Hani, thank you so much for having me on the show today. One Community, One Bond. We'll direct the first question to you, so you'll have 6 minutes to split between the two of you. And the question is, one premise behind the bond referendum is the idea that it balances projects across the entire school district community. The referendum includes projects at all 4 high schools and all 3 junior highs. However, some have questioned whether the plan truly meets everyone's needs, including those of special education families and families at Hills and Hoover Elementaries. Please explain as specifically as possible how the bond referendum will benefit everyone in the community, including these students.
Sure. Okay, so maybe I can lean in or do this to it. That's a big question, and I think you know that it would be difficult for me to look at every single project and itemize how every single person might experience a benefit. So where to begin? If your school doesn't get, for example, one of the people on our committee attends a school that doesn't get very many improvements at elementary level, but they will get improvements at a secondary level, junior high and high school. So when we say everyone benefits, you'll get something different. Hoover, which is where my kids go to school, they're in 1st, 3rd, and 5th grade. You mentioned it specifically. That school closes and my children will benefit, because when that school closes, City High will repurpose that land. And I live next to the schools, so I moved there so that my kids would go to Hoover and City High. And as I looked at the improvements and what it will mean to my neighborhood to have a high school that's competitive with the other 2 high schools, that will have a high school that brings programming back to the school, I decided that it was better for my children to close Hoover. I also know that my children have 4 other schools within a mile. One of them is 1.2 miles, I think. That's the one we go to, Horace Mann, in 2 years. So again, there's not much reason to complain. That's one of those funny things that's happened. Then I was at one of these forums a couple days ago, and someone said 600 or so kids live right next to Hoover, or walking distance with Hoover. Well, that means those same kids live within walking distance of the 4 other schools too. Those that were perhaps 200 yards closer to Hoover will now be 200 yards farther, but those that were 200 yards farther might be 200 yards closer to Longfellow. So in other words, there's a lot of reason why it makes sense to repurpose. That's just one example. If you see the improvements that have been made, they're making more space in these schools. They're right-sizing the schools that need it, and that is allowing for the flexibility for programming for students who have special education needs. So we know that that's happening. We also know that specific spaces are being designed for students with different needs. So that is happening. There's been some suspicion about that, but if you actually go to the schools, you will see the spaces are being built for students that have special education needs, and it's one of the top priorities we have as a district. I was canvassing a neighborhood, and someone from a para who's worked with special education students for 12 years answered the door. And she said she has kids that are in wheelchairs, and around lunchtime, which is a pretty long stretch at City High, it's hard to get through the hallway because the kids eat in the hallway because our lunchroom at City High is too small. So that's yet another way that we will make our spaces more accommodating to people who have disabilities. Another thing along those lines is she said there's home ec, was on a floor that the students who couldn't walk up the stairs couldn't get to, so they tried carrying them and then realized that was probably going to be a liability issue. So those students simply couldn't access any classrooms that weren't accessible by an elevator. So this does over and over again make our schools more ADA accessible, so that not only can students enter into the schools, which right now they can't in several of our schools, they can also access all the classrooms. Those are just some examples. It's a really big question, so do you want to add?
I'll add a few things to that, Holly. First and foremost, I think it is a pretty balanced plan. You know, when we look in this district, and by the way, it's a very unique district in the fact that we have 3 pretty significant population centers from a city standpoint. You know, for example, Coralville is the second largest city in Iowa without its own school district. So the fact that, you know, a city that size is still part of the Iowa City Community School District just shows the size and scope of our district. But having said that, we've got 4 high schools here that serve a pretty large area. Under this bond, all 4 high schools are receiving significant upgrades. Classrooms and gymnasium at Tate, at West High School, air conditioning, City High School, air conditioning, Liberty High School, which is already busting at the seams, which is showing just how quick that area is growing, a 500 student addition. And on that note, everybody who's had the opportunity to tour Liberty High School has marveled at the state-of-the-art new special education portion of that building. That's the power of new construction. We're able to build spaces, innovative spaces for all of the populations of our students. And I think that's very, very important to remember, because a lot of the students, a lot of our programmings have been pushed out because of space. Industrial tech, home tech, vocational education, new, am I getting my red light, honey? Thank you.
Thank you,
I'm gonna
Mr.
go first
Berry.
next time.
Sorry, you got to nudge me.
All right, so we'll transition to the Vote No September 12th committee. Again, you'll have 6 minutes to split between the 2 of you. Question is, it's been suggested that voters allow the current bond proposal to fail, allowing an opportunity to come together and create a new favorable proposal, one that's smaller or that prioritizes projects differently. However, others question whether it would be possible to match or surpass the level of engagement that went into the creation of the current facilities master plan and attain consensus in a short time frame as inflation threatens to drive up the cost of projects. Please explain, as specifically as possible, what plan you would propose for forming an alternative proposal.
Well, thank you, Holly, and thank you also, Honey, for inviting me. First of all, I would say to you that we are a policy-governed school district, and under policy governance, it is the superintendent and administration that are fully responsible for presenting a plan to the board members, and it is only the board members that can address or adopt a specific plan. So when I look at the current bond language, why would we need to actually vote no? And I will tell you, when I look at this bond language, it is a Trojan horse of a bond ballot referendum. There currently, in this bond ballot language, which is the only thing that we actually vote on because we don't vote on the facility master plan, as you know, there are no specific dollar amounts tied to schools. There are no locations specified for those schools. There is no time limit set up in the bond ballot language. So what that means is our administration can essentially come up with whatever facility master plan changes they want to recommend to the board. They can present those to the board, and as the board currently governs itself, it typically adopts the superintendent's recommendations without actually changing them in many circumstances. So if we consider what's changed in the past, there have been significant changes, and back in 2015, the Iowa City Community School District Board actually took over 400 seats out of the plan and built 2 new schools on the perimeter. When this bond is issued, what the ballot bond referendum language actually does do is it authorizes the district to issue bonds in the amount of $191.5 million. Now, we don't know how the district will structure those bonds, but what we do know is currently what is proposed are 4 separate times that the district will issue bonds starting in 2018, and the next dated date excuse me, is 2022, with projects continuing on beyond that. If you go back and examine a January 10th memo from Chris Lynch, He actually recommends a smaller bond. He thinks that, he thought at that time at least, it had a better chance of passing, and I would encourage anyone who's interested in a separate bond proposal to go back and read the documents that are put on the January 10th work session. But if we look at this plan now, it does, with the 4 separate bond issues, form the basis for a plan that could be adopted and tweaked in the future. One thing I think we do need to take into consideration on a future plan is there are reportedly many hundreds, if not a couple thousand worth of potential seats that are not accounted for in the district, in one area of the district, while another geographic area is reported to have excess capacity. I find that very concerning. I also find it concerning that we have a Lincoln project that has come in over budget significantly. Right now, there's no requirement that the board actually build that. If we're to look at what the district actually plans, or at least says it plans, Lincoln renovation and Man should get done in the first wave of bond issues. The West High should get done. There are a number of other projects on it as well. What I would encourage people to do is to request from the district how it proposes to issue those bonds and what projects are to be on those bonds. And remember that only the board can decide what the next bond proposal should look like.
I am very annoyed when the whole subject of equity is brought up, because to me, equity means a great deal more than access for handicapped students. Equity across the district should be equity for all the schools. And people, we've just heard about how City High needs to be made equal to Liberty. Tate High School, which is the 4th high school in the district, isn't even mentioned until the end in 2024, and what they're getting is minimal. They're getting a gym and 1 more classroom. Currently, they have the library being used for a classroom, and they have the students having to go to Mercer for any kind of physical education. I don't think anybody is worrying, about Tate. They also aren't worrying about Hills, which is left out completely. And that's not right either. And the ADA was passed in 1990. The school board should have done something about that a long time ago. It's been 26 years since that law was passed, and we have been in violation this entire time. We've passed bond issues before this in order to do various things, and we somehow never managed to comply. North Liberty is the fastest growing city in Iowa. And we already have the high school, or the elementary schools there overfilled. They're over capacity. And they really need 2 more new ones there in order to take up everything.
Is that the end?
I think that's it. It's read.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Mary. So we will transition over to questions for our candidates today. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to take this question. And again, we encourage you to be as precise as possible in your answer. Throughout your campaigns, you've had the opportunity to hear and consider a variety of perspectives on the bond referendum. Please explain how your opinion on the matter has evolved over time, and clearly state what your opinion is on the bond now. We'd like a yes or no. Oh, and we'll start down with JP.
Try this one.
So my thinking on the bond has evolved, and specifically on the facilities master plan, certainly since last summer, where and I still have concerns about the process that got us here, frankly. But I also one of the ways I've evolved is I understand this is where we're at, and this is our opportunity to to get this passed and complete that plan. As I've been hearing arguments on the no side. I've only become, my resolve for the bond has only become deeper. We just heard Tate needs more, and I agree. My daughter graduated from Tate. I'd like to move Tate up. They could use more space. I absolutely think we need room at Hills, and I'd like to see a lot more innovation put there. Clearly, we need another school up in either North Liberty or North Corridor where we have growth. And I would like to see us do something with Trek. So I haven't done the math on that, but now that's looking like a $300 million bond. I think if you add all those projects in that people are wanting, you can get larger very easily. And that, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think that would pass. What I haven't heard is, what do we cut out now? Who gets put on the back burner? Because I bet Trek wouldn't be on the front of that list. I just don't think that there's enough community support or awareness, certainly not for Trek. I meant Tate. And that's unfortunate. It's a very small school. Often the kids who go there, don't have strong advocates. And so I don't see, moving Tate up and trying to sell a smaller bond with that as passing, unfortunately. I certainly don't see adding another new school in this bond as helping a next bond pass. So I just haven't seen where, I just don't know how we get to that magic 60%. With what I've seen proposed from folks who are against this bond.
Thank you, Ollie, for telling me that I need to be concise and accurate. I appreciate that. Yeah, my opinion on the bond proposal has evolved. I started announcing as a candidate saying that I would support, I would vote for the bond referendum, and I still intend to do that. And I will encourage anyone else to do that also. I think that the parts of the master plan which are most appealing to me are school environment, air conditioning, making all the schools accessible. My kids went to Longfellow a number of years ago. The school wasn't accessible then. It still has not been accessible. It will be after it's renovated this year. And that's a great step forward. Making all the other schools accessible to me is a major thing that we have to do. Getting the right number of classrooms, whether or not we get too many is not so much of a concern to me, but getting enough classrooms wherever they are needed. The parts of the existing master plan which appealed to me, I have heard a lot of people talk about whether or not getting some classrooms in the Hills area. I've heard very strong opinions that students in North Liberty and Coralville are expected, the number of students in those areas are expected to increase. And certainly I would like to be able to have another elementary school at least built, whether or not from these bond proceeds or some other source. Special education, Tate, and expanding our vocational training opportunities. One of the things that I think is important about City High's renovation plan is that it can include additional space for vocational training and career course offerings, which is an area which I think we need to pay attention to. So yeah, my thinking's evolved. My basic approval of this approach remains the same.
So I've been a big proponent of the whole master plan for, the last 4 years since it started. And I knew all along that there was going to be a bond associated with the back half of it. And so I was, prepared to support that bond for the longest time. Months ago when it came before the board to discuss whether to break up the bond into multiple sections or keep it all as one, I actually spoke in front of the board to keep it together as one bond. And the reasons for that haven't changed for me. I feel that it is, a fairly pragmatic approach. I think it's the way to, we're putting all our eggs in one basket, but when you're asking a community to approve a bond time after time after time, that's going to be very, very difficult. And yes, there's been kind of a hard sell from the committee to get you to say yes, but there's a reason for it because we are putting all of our eggs in one basket. And I'd be very afraid that, putting out another bond 6 months from now is not going to be a viable solution. It will take a lot of time for us to get a bond put back out there. My thinking on it, has it evolved? I guess looking at it as the individual pieces and looking at how specific it is and how not specific it is, I wanted some more specificity on it. When I first looked at it, I didn't like some of the numbers that had come out for capacity. They seemed to be sort of all over the place and not real consistent. I have started to see some of the results in buildings, and that speaks to me looking at the results. I've been very fortunate that my kids have gotten to go to, very recently built schools, and I can see what, investing in those buildings has to offer. Just earlier today, I was at, a little community input session to look at some of the plans for Horace Mann, and seeing that they have a special education room instead of a closet, in the plan. It's not written in that language anywhere, right? But they have it on that plan. And the same thing was true for Liberty when it was built. There wasn't anything in the plan to build a giant special education suite, but they did it. And I've seen those results, and I know that we can build great facilities. That's what I have trust in our administration. I know there's plenty of non-trust to go around, but I've seen them build nice facilities, and I would like to make sure we do the work as a board to regain the trust in all of the other areas that they have failed.
Thank you. Just one observation for the audience that generously have submitted questions to our panelists. I would like to send it back just to specify who are you directing this question to, so that we don't get everybody to answer the question. So try to help me with that if you have. Yeah. So, Mr. Hemingway, if you can take this back to the audience, thank you.
Okay, how my positions evolved. Actually, I started my campaign supporting the bond. I'd seen the output of the facilities master plan and the work that's been done even before we got into this cycle. The work at Twain has been really, really strong. That went out more than a year ago. My resolve in support of the bond has only increased this summer as I've gone through my campaign, visiting schools, talking to principals, seeing their plans for improving their buildings that would be funded through the bond. I saw the Liberty High, as many people did. I actually saw it mid-July, and at that point, my position on the bond did change a bit, because once I saw Liberty, I decided I was going to start canvassing for the bond, because I believe it needs to be passed. I've seen, by talking to teachers and principals, I've seen physically how these buildings need to be improved, and I've seen that the district and the administration can deliver on a facilities master plan even without a bond in place to guide them. So they were just operating from a facilities master plan, and they have been doing amazing work. Just this last month, we opened 2 new buildings and 2 new ribbon cuttings, and we created capacity, air conditioning, amazing facilities for our students across the board. I've also seen the flexibility that is occurring in the schools. Back to the specificity of language, I just visited Twain not too long ago, and while I'm sure adding ELL, additional capacity, in Twain was not part of the specific plan, the fact that they had additional capacity allowed them to expand their ELL classrooms to accommodate the growing student population they had there. So I'm a very practical person, an operations person. Sadly, I do project plans in my sleep. And as I've also evolved my thinking about the bond, and I think about if this one does not pass, I've thought about what the process is going to be like to get a new bond in place, and even more importantly, getting a new bond passed. The board will work to create a new bond if this one doesn't pass. The board will get lots of engagement from the community to create the right priorities for this bond. But then we have to launch a campaign to get the bond passed. We still need 60% of the vote. We've got a committee. We're going to have to get petitions. We're going to have to raise money. We're going to have to door knock, door knock, door knock. I would like to ask respectfully the Vote No campaign to give the community a sense of how they intend to accomplish passing a new bond.
Thank you, Holly and Honey. When I entered the race, I entered with a perspective that I was 100% in behind supporting our bond for very selfish reasons. I have a husband who's an art teacher in our district, as well as a daughter who attends or has attended elementary, junior high, and now City High as a senior. And I have seen some of the issues that they've experienced with attending schools that were inadequate for my husband to teach because the art room was not designed as an art room, or because air conditioning was an issue. And I've had several conversations throughout the community with people that like to highlight that, you know, we were tough individuals, and when we went to school, we didn't have air conditioning, but when some of us went to school, they probably didn't go to school with people like me. But times change, and we need to continue to move forward and take care of our community when we know we can. My perspective has changed because entering this race and being down at the farmers market has allowed me the opportunity to meet with people that don't always agree with me in supporting a bond. So I'm able to empathize and understand their perspective and their concern that that is a lot of money we're asking the community to entrust in our district, administration namely, because that's what I typically hear. But as been pointed out by several other people, the board will be ultimately responsible to ensure that our administration actually stick to the plan of the 22 projects that's outlined in the facilities master plan that will be completed under the bond. And I know in talking with the folks that support the bond and want to be at the table on September 12th, that we will ensure that that happens. We're invested in making sure that our community gets the needs that they truly need in order to see that our kids are able to succeed and not have concerns where they shouldn't have concerns. As it's been mentioned, these are things that should have been done 40, 20 years ago. Why continue to wait? We have a prime opportunity to step forward and say, the time is right, let's pass the bond, and hopefully elect people that recognize that it wasn't perfect, that there are huge opportunities that's still left on the table that we need to address in the North Corridor as well as Hills.
So I was the owner and the founder of Children's Center for Therapy, and I have a real passion for helping children with special needs, as well as really any child that needs a help up. I've done a lot with the immigrant population as well, and just absolutely, it's just my vocation in life. It's what I was born to do. And I sold the Children's Center a year ago, and I had a parent, a little guy who'd been coming to the center since he was 3 years old. And the parent came to me, and there was a concern with the playground, at the Shimmick playground. And so I jumped in because I was, had some free time. And I went through the process with the Shimmick playground, and I was at the work session that finally evolved to a work session because the board had voted 4-3 to not make any changes to the Shimmick playground. So instead, they ordered the playground, they did everything, and then retrospectively decided, yes, maybe we need to have a work session and understand more about what's going on. I was just really concerned about the democratic process. And honey, I appreciate that you said that initially, because I didn't see that at all at the work session, and I was very concerned about just, there were so many errors. And, first of all, our superintendent had said that our equity director had reviewed the plans when the equity director didn't even know he was supposed to review the plans because he didn't even know he was in charge of ADA accessibility for playgrounds. So that was a mistruth. And then there were just several other areas where I just was extremely concerned about what happened. And I'm not a political person. People who know me, I would have never thought I would run for the board. But when I watched what went on with this, I was just appalled at the lack of democracy. And the parent has plenty of other things to do besides trying to fight for an equitable playground. And playgrounds are considered classrooms under ADA. So it's just like having a classroom that's not equitable. And through the process, it was just, we did not, the school was almost, there were staff members who actually came out and said, you know, it's going to be compliant, the playground's going to be compliant. And the reality is we're already a week into school and it's not compliant, and they're saying it's incomplete. And not only is the Shimmick playground not compliant, but the last 4 playgrounds that we've remodeled or that we've built aren't. And so I'm grateful that North Liberty got it right, but we don't have it right in some of our other playgrounds. The new Hoover playground is not compliant, is not ADA accessible. And again, these are classrooms. The Alexander playground has a huge 6-inch curb around it, and we're wanting to give this administration $191 million when we can't even get a $100,000 playground correct.
I think what I've learned is that I think we all recognize that we have very real facilities needs in this district. And people have very real concerns about whether these projects are going to get done unless the bond passes. And there are other people who are very concerned about whether the projects will get done if the bond passes. And in the meantime, we have people, you know, our eggs are not all in the basket because we've got Hills and Trek and an additional elementary capacity needs in North Liberty that are not on the bond. And people are very concerned about whether those needs are going to be met, whether or not this bond passes. So I think what it boils down to is the next board has a huge amount of work to do to build trust between the community and the school district, to build trust among different segments of our community. And I guess what I just want to say is that if I'm elected and if this bond passes, I will work to implement the planned projects with fidelity, because I think if the bond passes, that's what the voters are asking us to do. If this bond doesn't pass, I am committed to working hard to listen to everyone in the community to put together a bond proposal that we can get widespread community support for and have it pass.
Oh, you're so good with time. Now we are going to move to the audience questions. Now, is that okay, Holly? Yeah. You're done? Okay. The audience questions, I have 2 of them that are not directed to a specific person, and this, I am afraid, will not be able to cover because of the time constraint. But you can, after 7 o'clock, you can have the answer from all of them, because they are going to be hanging in here for about 30 minutes, maybe after, or 1 hour. So you are welcome to, so those 2 questions, if you want to cut back and specify a member or one of the candidates that you want to ask, please do that. Those are 2. I'm going to give it to Mr. Hemingway, who's volunteering to help us today. These 2 people, yeah. We have 3 questions here for the for you, Mitch, and Mary, Kate, and this is if you can cover this, you know, each one of them should take how long? 2 minutes, we said.
2 minutes. Yep.
2 minutes. If you can do them in 6 minutes, you're good, I think. If you're going to exceed beyond that, that would be difficult, you know, for us. But you've got 3 questions here.
I feel like we're playing a board
Game
game.
show?
Yeah, all right.
We're going to have to be quick, and I hope we can answer them thoroughly, but.
We'll cut you off after 2 minutes.
Yeah, no, I know, everyone
For
should
each
get to talk.
question. If you want to use the 6 minutes for one question, it's fine with me.
No.
No, I'll get to this. First one's pretty easy to answer. Mary Kate stated programs will return to city. What programs will return to city when Hoover is closed? where is this stated in the FMP? So I don't know if the person who asked this question has taken the time to meet with the assistant superintendents or the superintendent or any of the members of staff. I've been meeting with them for a long time when I heard that my kid's school was closing. So I've been getting more and more information over the years, and I finally have something pretty specific that the district provided to the community, and we've had it available. We've had it at the farmer's market. I don't know if it's on our website or anything like that, but it's definitely a public document, and it provides the community exactly what the district intends to do when it repurposes that property. With regard to what programs return to it, career and technical education classes will return to it. I learned the acronym ACE. It stands for Architecture, Construction, Engineering, and also manufacturing and metals. So these programs will be brought back to city. And if anyone wants to meet with me afterward, I can get them the map and show them where those things are going. So that's an example of programs. We will also be able to hopefully bring some athletics back onto campus, or at least keep them there in a more viable fashion. I know I'm speaking quickly. Do you want to go to the next one? Do you have one? Okay, so what is the real total cost per 1,000 for this bond? It's 98 cents. That's my answer to that question. Again, I got a sigh from my left over here. These are numbers that we have been given in spreadsheets. I don't know if the people that say no have taken the time to meet with the CFO. I don't know how you can argue with numbers, but I'm not the person to argue with them. I'm not the CFO. I do see the spreadsheets. I see that the numbers are based on 0% growth where we have 4% growth. So the tax levy numbers we've been given are artificially high, because we have a very conservative CFO when he gives us those numbers. Again, I think that it's probably not a great use of time for me to go through those. I believe I did bring that information if anyone wants to see it afterward.
All right, and this question was, Mary Kate Mitch, please address the no vote representatives' arguments. I think the main arguments that I've heard the no vote side make, over the course of this campaign, the first has been about the lack of trust. We can't trust the administration of the school district to do what's right. There are two issues on this election day, right? You all in this room are running for school board, right? That's one vote. Those people hold the superintendent accountable. The bond vote is about our kids. It's about the future of this community. That's a separate vote. So don't misconstrue the two, because they are separate. They're separate votes. And I feel very strongly that it is important for voters to recognize, I just disagree with the notion of punishing kids and keeping them in not the facilities they deserve, because others have issues with a lack of trust of administration. If there is a lack of trust, make votes on the school board to change that, because those are the folks that are able to do that. The question before that was asked was, what is your plan to do? What's your plan B? And I still haven't heard what a plan B is. It took 4 years to come up with this comprehensive plan. If plan B is to, present plan B in 2022, that's fine, but that just needs to be out there. This idea of a new bond in 6 months, I don't know where that comes from. I don't know how we're going to do in 6 months what it took 4 years to do. And lastly, it's expensive. I'm not going to lie. We're talking a lot of money, but it's public education. I mean, if we as a community are not going to invest in public education, then what are we going to invest in? What kind of a community are we? So I think those are the things we really need to ponder as we consider how we're going to vote. Thank you. Oh, Mary Kate.
We have 30 more seconds, right? So I'm just going to say
Yes,
one more
you have
thing.
30 more.
I would accept many of the no vote positions. Put those on the table. I've heard them, and I put them on the table, and I would still say no excuse not to vote for the bond, because we have to, in the end, go back to what is the practical solution. And the only practical solution we have, practical means meets immediate needs. It means at the lowest interest, it's ready to be voted on right now. We cannot delay these needs. These aren't bells and whistles. So I keep thinking, okay, I accept your criticism, but you still have to vote for the bond.
As a matter of fact, Karen had left me with about 1.5 minutes. If you'd like them to do a rebuttal, you would? Okay. So, Carolyn, go ahead. You have 1.5 minutes.
I'd like to defer to Mary But the idea that this will cost 98 cents per every $100,000 is simply not true. And we have looked through this in quite a bit of detail, and I will give it to Mary so you can hear.
Just the clarification is, the question was for every $1,000.
I get it. If you could just give me my time here, thank you. It's not 98 cents. That's what's being marketed. What is in the district certified budget packet, which was approved by the board, I believe, back in March. You need to take that 98 cents. To that 98 cents, you need to add the 53 cents of debt we would otherwise not have to pay on that is related to the 2003 bonds. You also need to add that board discretionary levy of 45 cents back. It gives you a levy rate for the debt levy itself of 1.95033, which would be rounded up to $1.96 per thousand. That works out to about twice what is being marketed. That board discretionary levy is discretionary. It's coming out of the cash reserve of the general fund. If you'll recall, back in 2008, the district got into financial trouble because it had overspent because of the infrastructure. It had to pull $4.987 million out of the general fund and put it into the capital projects fund. We need to be very prudent about how we spend money on this bond. We need to be honest about what it actually costs. So isolate what your tax rate is for the schools with the bond in it, and you compare it to what your tax rate for the schools would be without the bond debt service levy to arrive at what this bond is projected to cost. Thank you.
We are going to continue the questions of the audience until we reach 7 o'clock. And the rest of the questions we are not going to discard. We are going to consider pretty well after we go off the air. So I have here a question for Karen from the audience. 2 minutes, Karen.
Oh, I won't even need to. So the question is, does the GO bond ballot language commit the school district to completing any particular project? And I think the answer that we've had right from the district is that it does not. So the GO bond language, the GO bond money can only be used for projects that are specified in the language, but I don't think it requires that any of the particular projects listed actually get completed.
And a question for Janet for 2 minutes.
The question is, don't you have a conflict of interest as an ACT executive when you are a vendor to the school district? I'm very proud of the work that I do at ACT. I have, in 27 years, developed extensive experience in the education system. It's helped me understand the needs of our district. It's helped me understand the needs of students. As far as I know, there are no contracts between ACT and the school district. If ever the school district is looking for services from ACT and that would come up from a decision from a board perspective, I would of course recuse myself from any kind of vote on that, just as I think any other person on the board who would work for a company and the district was requesting services from their company, they would do the same.
Thank you very much. You actually took only 1 minute. So. We are saving a lot of time now. So, West Mayor, you have a question from the audience here?
Why should we, sure. Why should we believe that the school district will stay within budget on the bond when they're already 30 to 40% over budget on the preferred Lincoln renovation per Dwayne Van Hemert? Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't think that we should believe that. And, you know, Dwayne promised us that we'd have an accessible playground, and it's not accessible. And that's the one point I made at that work session is our district keeps saying they're going to do one thing, but yet they do another. And not having trust in the administration is the big reason why many people aren't in favor of this bond. And we don't get a second chance to spend $191 million. So if we're all about health, safety, and accessibility, which is what this bond says it is, then why aren't the last 4 playgrounds that we've built that are also classrooms accessible? I mean, that's the part that I have a difficult time thinking that we're going to actually do what we say we're going to do when the first sentence basically in the bond talks all about the health, safety, and accessibility for all children. So And the accessibility of playgrounds is more than just for the children. It's also, you know, if you're a grandparent taking your kid to the playground, it's really nice to have an accessible playground. If you're a parent with a new baby in a stroller, it's really nice to have an accessible playground. So, and it's not just about the accessible playgrounds. We do not take special education. We are not doing what we need to do for special education in this district. We are a district in need, the only district in the state in need of intensive supports. We need to trust our administration first. We need to start doing things right, and then we can pass a $191 million bond. But right now, we need to pass a smaller bond that is more in compliant with the community and more in consensus with the community, and find a way to compromise, because our community is already divided enough, and it's divided because we don't have strong leadership. When we can get strong leadership, we will get there. Thank you, Hani.
We have 2 minutes, one from my friend Karen here and one from Janet. If you would like to answer,
Yes, please. Yeah,
would you
so,
like to go?
so that was, the question was,
2 minutes.
okay, whether or not they had remained on budget, and I don't know where the information came from that Karen, or Laura offered, but I know that the budget to date for the programs, according to the FMP, was $154 million, and that the amount spent to date was $145 million. That's 6.02% under budget. The projects were on time, and something I hadn't thought about until I got this information, because I requested it from the district, is we haven't lost a minute of instruction. That's great. I mean, if we could just go positive, that's a wonderful achievement that we have done all of these projects on this facilities master plan and not lost any instruction. I didn't know if you wanted to say something else.
Well, I'm just going to say on Lincoln, yeah, the plans came in over budget. We don't know what the final construction is going to be. You know, if I say I want to build a $300,000 house and the builder comes back and says it's going to be $400,000, that doesn't mean I build a $400,000 house. So, you know, coming in over budget and what's actually built, you know, those are two different things. Lots of construction projects of our schools come in over budget. They get pared down to fit within the budgetary constraints that the board has put forth.
Thank you. You are within time. That's very nice. There is a question that is directed to all candidates. I would like one of you to take this question. It says, please let us know your thoughts on armed officers in schools. So who would like to? Charlie.
Step up, Charlie.
I actually had discussions about police officers in schools with my good friend Henry Harper and the Iowa City Police Chief, and other people too. Armed officers is not something I'm going to support. Community officers in the schools would be something I think we definitely could consider, not because they're there to enforce the criminal codes, because they can be there to interact with students in a very positive way. And they're not involved in discipline. They're not involved in making decisions about a student's future in the school. So I think community officers, neighborhood watch officers, whatever their title are, could be a valuable addition to the schools. Not armed officers, not sworn officers. Sworn officers have the ability to arrest kids, and we're not going to do that. Okay.
Thank you. There is one question for Mr. Clausen here. The bond is not perfect. What is one thing you should change in order to correct that?
Can you repeat that?
The bond is not perfect. I mean, this person agrees that the bond is not perfect. And is there anything you can change to make it perfect? That's in verbatim.
No, it's never going to be perfect. We live in a democracy. There are a lot of different opinions. So one person's definition of perfect goes up against someone else's definition of perfect. Like I said, if we really want to put all our eggs in one basket, we're just looking at a much larger bond. And we do have other projects. I don't think that's the way to go about building them. But what I think is perfect is going to be different than what someone else thinks. So that's not even a real concept, right? We don't have, perfect is not an actual thing that exists in reality. And so especially when you're in a democracy, it's not going to work. I'll tell you, when I saw the special ed suite at Liberty, that's as close to perfect as it gets for special ed. I can't explain to you how dramatic that is from where we've come in special ed, when literally kids were in boiler rooms and broom closets in the 70s and hidden away on purpose because they looked different and people weren't comfortable, to having a center space. To me, that's moving in a beautiful direction. So that's getting there.
We have about 7 minutes something, or 6 minutes something, right, Gideon? And usually I use this to wrap up and give credit to the directors and the staff and all that. But I think because of the importance of this task, I would like to use this time to give the two campaigns here a chance to say final notes to the community. Look at the camera and talk to the viewers why you are for and why you are against. So I'm going to give each one of you 2 minutes to do that.
Each person or each side?
Each side.
I'll just take 1 minute. Many of you don't know that the board is operating under something called policy governance, which was adopted by the board in 2003 and was invented to help expedite meetings of corporate boards, not democratically elected people. I don't believe that the people who are running for school board have any idea how little control they will have over the superintendent once that they're elected. And the real reason that I can't possibly vote for this is because it's an issue of trust. I cannot believe that the superintendent in the current administration will use this money wisely.
1 minute.
Thank you. I think Carolyn, in many respects, is correct, with $191.5 million resting on very vague ballot language without much in the way of specifics, general language like health, safety, accessibility. Trust is incredibly important. We recently saw the current administration decide to proceed with a project at Penn without having the full approval of a majority of the board. That was concerning, and many would regard it as insubordination. We've heard a lot of promises about all the great things that will happen, but before we can add career and technical training back to the schools, that has to go through a curriculum review process. There is a process set up in the district. That has not been done yet. There is not a requirement in the ballot language even to put specific rooms in. I think we need to remember that there is a good possibility that the legislature will extend the sales tax in the next few years. That's the penny sales tax for schools. The district itself estimated that if approved and the money flows to schools, that...
Thank you, Mary. Thank you.
Okay, so I would say, as far as the trust issue is concerned, I'm not here to tell you to trust the district. I don't represent the district. I am here because I'm a parent of 3 kids and because I intend to stay in Iowa City for the rest of my life. And what I do know is the only thing I can count on is this facilities master plan. We've had 5 years of it being followed. And that was through 16 different board members. It didn't change. So the one thing I think I can count on is this FMP. And if we support it as a community, it's going to just make it that more reliable. So I'm just begging for you to be practical and think about what we really need now and how we get it.
And real quick before I make my pitch, I just do want to say something real quick. I really mean this. I'm so proud to live in a community where we have 7 members, people running for the school board of such great quality. I mean, I think that says a lot about the place we live in, and I just want to commend all 7 of you for throwing your hats in the ring. But it still comes down to kids. Our students deserve better. It's that simple. We can't ask our teachers to deliver 21st century world-class education in classrooms that look like they came from the set of Leave It to Beaver. We're better than that. We as a community are better than that. So I ask each of you on Election Day to please consider the future of this community and vote yes for this bond.
Thank you very much. As a matter of fact, we are so grateful, and I'm sure that our audience appreciates your efforts tonight. It has been, I know, a very constrained time for you to express everything. You didn't have a chance, but we have 1 hour or more to discuss off the air. We are going to keep the same format. I'm going to refer the questions that you have to Holly Hines, and we'll continue. So if something was left in your answer, or you want to say something more, I have still a couple of questions for some of the members here. So I would like to thank Cedar for being our cameraman today, Erin, our director and graphic design at Public Access TV. She's a very talented young lady. And our chief director there, Kieran Fuller, out there. So we appreciate you, Holly Hines. I know it has been a very hectic time for you from one forum to another. You are just like our candidates. You didn't have to sleep or to eat or to take care of your house. But that's a very demanding role, and we are so grateful to you. We would like to thank you very much.